Yeah, I like it. So is Cole still, is he still muted?
Did you get it, Cole? It's recording. I don't know if you can hear us.
All right. Well, we can just talk.
Yeah, I think we could
It's
probably get
a small,
started.
intimate group today. Got Shelly, who's been with us, I think, from the get-go. You got Alexander, Chris, and Brian.
Brian did the mentor program.
Yeah, and I think I saw Brian last week at a bank, ICBM, Independent Community Bankers. M. What's M stand for? Money.
Money, yeah, money.
That's what bankers need. Money.
All right, marketing's going to get yelled at us here, so we have to be quiet so he can do his job.
All right, are we all set to start?
Oh, sure. Hi.
Hey there. How we doing?
Good.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, but I just want to welcome everyone to another Hangout with Evan and our special guest, Brad, to discuss the herd mentality. And so I just want to go over, if you have any questions throughout the chat, feel free to either chat them or use the raise hand feature. You're muted on entrance, and I'll unmute you if you have a question you'd like to get asked. So with that, Evan, Brad, take it away.
All right. Well, this is truly kind of a hangout, Brad. So I'm at home. My truck broke down, so it's in the shop, and I came home to do this. So I've done one from the airport and one from here now.
I'm gonna bring a projector in so I can just sit in my office and project the logo behind me, so I don't have to keep moving to different conference rooms.
Yeah, there you go. So this is the second or third one that you and I have talked in.
Second one. And I actually got the document and read it even, so I'm prepared.
Okay, so what'd you think?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. All right, so you agree? Yeah.
Pretty accurate, and definitely what I experienced in working, when I was in operations and out in IT, and now seeing it as a consultant, very, very much the case of, what do I have to do to be kind of keeping up with everyone else and not do too much?
Well, so if we both agree, then we're done here.
All right, cool.
Yeah, it's easy. No, all right. So this is chapter 6, herd mentality, and so you read the chapter.
Yep.
You know kind of what it's about. What in what you read really stuck out? Was there one thing that's just like, yeah, I just dealt with it last week?
I think the one you had, I'm going to try and find it right now. You had a comment, you were talking to somebody, and they were like, we do what we need to do, or it was like the bare minimum or something. And that absolutely, we're just doing what we have to do because that's what everyone else is doing, not because we want to do it. We don't want to do better. We're just doing what we have to because we have to.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and some of the herd mentality, and in the chapter, some of the things are good, right? And some of the things are not so good, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was we start off with like the whole Windows versus Linux, and people just go with it, or you see it a lot in networking. Cisco, it's easy to find Cisco certified people or people with experience, so people just go with it, whether or not it's the right one or not. That's not for me to make that call. They just do it because that's what they're familiar with and what other people do.
Right. Well, so let's talk about one of the good things about, the herd mentality is it sort of defines for us, and, and Alexander being a law student will be able to relate. We have this thing called due care, due diligence. We have this thing called negligence. And, that's usually defined of what a reasonable person would do, right? Given a similar situation or set of circumstances. So if I am doing what everybody else is doing, then I suppose it's easier to make my case that I'm reasonable.
Yeah.
If I'm not following the herd, because the one thing I get almost all the time, I get two most popular questions that I get from boards of directors on information security are, one, how do we compare?
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to figure out where they're at in the herd. And the second thing is, what's the number one thing I can do to make everything better, right? And then I have that joke where I always say, well, I'll fire everybody.
Yeah.
And then, they laugh, and then they say, oh, no, seriously, what do we do? And, there is no one thing, right?
Right.
So in the chapter we talk, I start off with, how the herd behavior has been studied, extensively. It's a normal human thing for us. Where Sigmund Freud and Wilfred Trotter, two, classic, pioneers in social psychology. They wrote the book Instincts of the Herd in Peace and War, where they made observations. And then there was more recently a study done by Leeds University, where they found that as few as 5% can influence the other 95%. Did you catch that study? That I put.
I didn't read the study, but yeah, it's
no. But you read my excerpts, I suppose.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting. So the study was, volunteers were asked to walk around this large room, and they were asked to walk around randomly, in complete silence. So they're not allowed to speak with each other. And then a few of the volunteers they picked out and instructed them to walk like they knew what they were doing, like they knew where they were going, but still remaining silent and not urging anybody to follow. And before long, the rest of the volunteers started to follow this small group of volunteers and no longer followed random patterns. And they did it subconsciously. They didn't even realize they were doing it. Which I thought was kind of interesting. But then the research also showed that as the number of people in a crowd increases, the number of informed individuals decreases. So we talked about the population of, in information security, how many, people, we have, and how many companies we have. A few of the informed end up kind of taking the crowd where they go. That's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Assuming that informed is actually informed.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, that's kind of the first part. So the problems that I cover, the first is this false sense of security. Where when you think of, kind of the herd mentality and the safety in numbers, I think of like in Africa, right? A herd of antelope. It's the weak one and the sick one or the old ones that get picked off, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's easy to think that you're in the herd and have this false sense of security. And that's one of the things we cover, sort of in the book. Any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, as you're talking about it, right, it's not just with security, just in general, the hardest thing you see is that first person taking that step and doing that new thing, whatever it is. And as soon as you get somebody doing it, like with watching the kids play and just one person taking over and kind of saying, here's what we're going to do. And everyone else just kind of falls in line. But it takes that first person to take that kind of leap of faith and get out of that herd of just kind of milling around. I think.
Sure.
So yeah, it makes a lot of sense the more we, as you're talking through it.
Yeah, the more you kind of dig into it. And again, it could be bad or it could be good.
Right.
It sort of depends on who you are, I guess, in that herd. But then, we go on to talk to you because I think it's always kind of interesting, kind of the dynamics around this herd mentality. So I talk about, how psychologists, two of the most common reasons for the herd mentality is social pressure. Mm-hmm. I guess that's kind of one. And then the other is the belief that there's no way that so many people could possibly be wrong. So I must be, I'm ignorant. I may not know, but as long as I'm doing what everybody else is doing, that's kind of the second common reason.
Yeah.
And then two additional reasons, I think, which are sad, are fear, and kind of playing off that same belief thing, fear and ignorance. Because one of the things, around information security that I've always believed strongly is the more intimately I know the systems, the more intimately I know the organization, the more intimately I know the culture, the better my security is and the less fear I have. I sort of know where my vulnerabilities are.
Right.
But if fear is my motivator and I'm following this herd mentality, then I won't know those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're gonna focus on what the herd is looking at and not realize you're always playing catch up. Now suddenly you're lagging behind, not staying up to speed or at the front of the pack.
Right, because I think the herd mentality could apply maybe, because we have this saying, information security is not a one size fits all, right?
Right.
And few people disagree with that, yet in practice, I think most people adopt it, where they sort of believe that, well, if I'm doing what everybody else is doing, so the one size fits all, then I'm secure or I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, that's different than what information security is when we defined it, very early on in the book.
Yeah, because what works for a big organization with dedicated staff isn't going to work for small people, smaller places. But if they say, oh, well, we're doing the same things, if you're not doing it correctly, then that doesn't make you secure. Right? If you can't configure it and support it, just because you're doing it doesn't mean it's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we defined what information security is. It's managing risks, right, to information confidentiality, integrity, and availability using administrative, physical, and technical controls. So if it's managing risks and I expected your controls or your things to work well in my environment, we'd have to have the same risks.
Right? Yeah, right.
If we had the same risks, then that would mean, because a risk is derivative of threats and vulnerabilities. So that means we'd have to have the same threats and have the same weaknesses.
And even building on that, the same risk appetite and the same, mentality and approaching it. Yeah. So
I think, and as you kind of, I think we're all susceptible to the herd mentality. It's not like, you bicker or complain about, the herd mentality is evil. It's using the herd mentality, but still not taking focus off of us, off of our organization, off of what's best for us. And because a company, XYZ company bought a new technology or a new solution, doesn't necessarily mean that new technology or solution is going to work for us.
Right.
It may not be our most significant risk at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess, to get back, if our definition of information security is managing risks, then I need to manage risks, my own risks, which would require a risk assessment, some type of a risk treatment plan, and then reassessments, right? Getting into this, what's that word called? Program cycle of continual assessment.
Yeah.
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 Or do you disagree? Because it's okay. You can disagree.
No, I think
you're an expert too.
No, I think you're, overall you're right. We see it where everybody is saying, well, we need to do X, Y, and Z because that's what I see other people doing. Mm-hmm. And whether X, Y, and Z are good or bad isn't necessarily what they should be focused on. It's what is, like you said, what is our biggest risk? And then say, okay, here's our risk. Now what are other people doing to address these risks? Maybe that's a better way to approach it, is kind of customizing that herd mentality to say, okay, here's our risks. Now, how is the best way, what's the herd mentality to address these risks rather than, well, these are the biggest things we're seeing others do. We'll just do what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, so good points. I think also, then we get into, mediocrity, how I explained sort of how if we overemphasize or adopt the herd mentality to an unhealthy extent, we start to settle for this mediocre information security program where, and then to your point, we start getting to this checkboxy thing, right? It's just another motivator for that.
Yeah. Well, and then, that goes to that you're not innovating anymore. You're not really kind of improving it. You're just doing what you have to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, if the herd is mediocre, which it inevitably is, my security is also going to be mediocre. When I talk about how over the course of, my career, and probably yours is similar, we've encountered thousands of organizations over the years. And how many organizations would you say you look at their security program and go, wow, that's a good, well-run, well-managed, right-sized information security program? How many would you say in your career have you come across?
I mean, not including the ones that I did, right?
Well, no, those are all good. Yeah.
Easily, you could count on one hand. Yeah. 3, 5, maybe 7. I mean, I would say 5 is probably a good bet. Less than 10 for sure.
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to say names, but I could absolutely think of 3 or 4 right off the top of my head that I go, yep, these are the ones, and because they stick out.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think some of that is attributed to this herd mentality. It's the lack of innovation, the lack of focusing on, sort of what's best for you. We do live in a world today, shortcut, easy button sort of world.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked back on, in chapter 2 of the book about the foundation and how important it is to have an asset management program and all those things. That takes work.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm not going to visit that foundation and do what the herd is doing, because we are in a money grab situation, which I think is a chapter. Did we already do that? I don't know if that's a future chapter or if that's a past one.
I think it might be a future one. I don't know.
I don't know.
I wasn't on for that one.
All right, so probably not then. So the money grab is, there's estimated in 2019, I just saw a study from Gartner, $128 billion will be spent on information security next year. And you wonder, has our security gotten any better with the continued higher investments in information security?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the herd is buying more stuff, so maybe I buy more stuff. Yet I'm still missing that foundational piece or fundamental pieces of a security program. And until you focus on that, you're just going back to another chapter, putting lipstick on a pig, right?
Oh, I mean, we saw that we had, a potential customer, and they were talking to us about another security firm doing a risk assessment for them. And it was overseas, and it included things like the analyst was going to have to travel first class on the flight, and the cost was like exorbitant. And I was like, well, what? Yeah, we're going off the rails on the other one. But what good does it do to do an assessment if you have no money left over to actually fix anything, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, did I tell you I got bumped to first class on a flight back from Toronto a week before last?
No.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet. Air Canada, first class, they started giving me stuff. I don't fly first class. You know me.
No.
I'm not a first class kind of guy.
Everybody else in first class was like, what is he doing here?
Yeah, right. I think that's why they gave me first class. I think that's why they bumped me up. They took a look at me and they're like, yeah, this guy looks like he's had a rough day. Let's give him first class. And then they started they gave me like headphones. I don't know, cheese.
Yeah. My response, they asked us if we had to send them first class. I said, no, we'll just send one of our short analysts. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I did appreciate the room. Holy moly. The guy sitting next to me, I never touched him. You know, on a plane, you're always touching the people to the left and to the right. Never touched him. It was nice.
No herd.
All right, so what's that?
I said, you don't have to worry about the herd there. You got plenty of space.
No, well, yeah, different herd. Oh, man, that was a nice herd. I didn't mind being part of that herd for a little while, but I'm not going to pay for it either. All right. So triteness, we talk about triteness, so that, you know, playing off that mediocrity and going into the herd mentality. And there's lots of things that are cited in the book that support these assertions. It's not just information security, but I think we need to buck the trend if we truly want to fix some of our problems in information security. So where we talk about triteness, there's a quote from, General John Michael from the Air Force. Our desire to fit in leads us to too easily trade creativity for conformity. And you see that playing out, I think, in our industry as well, because we're still trying to fix risks that existed 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, it's a constant cycle. Some of the same things that we're visiting today are the same things that we had problems with before. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of renaming going on. There's a lot of marketing creativity, but there's not a lot of solution creativity. The big thing now is AI and machine learning. So people are labeling their products that to sell that, but at the end of the day, and I've got plenty of stories of where, we've looked at AI solutions or solutions that pose as AI, and you find out that this is nothing more than something we've been doing 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They just repackaged it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and going back to the asset management, I mean, that was my first job in IT was, going around for Y2K bugs and writing down what rooms computers were in and where they patched because they had no idea what was out there. That you still see that 20 years later. People just don't know what's out there. They don't know what they have. It doesn't change. It's the same challenges.
I wonder how we get that 5% that influences the rest of the 95% to get foundational and talk about and focus on asset management. Yeah. And make it cost effective, because I think that's one of the big challenges you get all the time is, well, there's no return on my investment. There's no cost benefit to doing, asset management. When, if we did it right, you could demonstrate that. If you were creative, you could demonstrate that there is a cost benefit in asset management. And I think if you were forward looking on where some of the regulations are going, and specifically, GDPR being the one that I think is the most, disruptive in the last few years.
Yeah.
How can you do GDPR without asset management?
Yeah, you can't.
Right. So I think it's good to get ahead of that curve now, as opposed to being so disruptive, later on.
Yeah.
But whatever, we'll keep preaching it. Do you have any questions? Because I'm doing like two things. I don't have a second screen. Oh, we have a chat.
Yeah, Alexander put some stuff about case law about.
Ooh, I like it. Let's read that. Tugboats. All right, I'm gonna have to read that later. Thank you, Alexander. All right, 4 choices. That was another piece, where it was covered in the book. I'm not going to read it, but it talks about how, we were all, I used a story about, when we were growing up, our parents would say things like, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you too? Or, would you follow? And like, no, of course not. We wouldn't do that. But then, there's an example of this creative thinking, from Oxford University, and Jeff Tabin, who invented bungee jumping. Right. So now bungee jumping is kind of a thing. So it's an example of how I guess it's not so ludicrous, to jump off a bridge now where it would have been completely ludicrous, before. But it's the same kind of out of the box thinking. I think that our industry could benefit from, especially if we weren't so segmented and so, I think, cutthroat competitive in our industry. If we spent more time thinking of creative solutions, to do things. But it is what it is. Examples of all that good stuff and ways I think that we can work on it and make it better. There's more research. I think these social studies are just really kind of eye-opening. There's another study that's cited in the book of how in a group, we can get participants to choose things that are inferior, clearly inferior options and products because other people chose them. Right? And so when you apply that same thing to information security, there's an obvious solution to the problem. However, not everybody else isn't doing it. So I can easily be influenced to choose the inferior option and not secure things. Right? So the first half of this chapter is really just all kind of pointing out these issues, talk about false information, lack of information. This is one that bugs me because, I'm a data guy. I like data. I like the right data. And the way you do data science, I think a lot of times we do it backwards. Data science is, you don't look at the data and then derive your question. Instead, you figure out what's your question and then go find the data.
Yeah.
Right. And when you do that, you have to fight confirmation bias, which is, I have a question that I already have an answer that I want, and so I go find data to support the answer that I wanted. Right. So you have to fight those things, but just the lack of data in our industry is really sort of baffling. When you look at the studies, the one that's referenced over and over and over again, and it has been for years, and it's not a bad study, is the Ponemon Institute, the cost of data breach study, which, in recent years has been picked up and sponsored by IBM. Because I've heard it so many times where people have said, well, the average cost of a data breach is $137 per record based on the latest Ponemon research.
Yeah.
And then you go, well, but the Ponemon research was based on 419 companies. And there are 15 million companies in the United States. So do you think that maybe there's a sample error?
Oh, yeah.
There, right?
And I'll be honest, I've fallen under that, because like you said, that's all that's out there. There's just not a whole lot of information to go off of. So, you kind of go, hey, look, based on this really small sample size, this is what it's at. Even if it's half that, could your company survive a breach? Right. But,
right.
Or is it double that? We don't know. And some of those companies that they bring into it are pretty good size too.
Right.
So,
and you couldn't apply, you can apply these things at sort of a macro level, but I can't manage my information security program at any one particular company at a macro level. Right? It's a micro application. It's my own information security program. So if I'm asked to estimate the dollar loss of a breach at an organization, it requires a lot more work than just citing a Ponemon research study.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
There's just so much error. So if I'm going to base my decisions on this, it ends up being false information, then, garbage in, garbage out. Right?
True.
And that's the one study, like, oh my gosh, I love the study. It's actually good insight into those companies and the things that they went through, but it's not good to apply.
Yeah, I think part of it is, going back to her, but it's what's there. So it's easy to grab that and say, hey, if we have a breach, it's going to be $137 a record. Our MDM solution is going to be $70 per year to do this. If we have one breach of 10,000 records, it's cheaper to do our MDM for the next 10 years than to have a single breach. So because how else, that's easy and quick, and everybody kind of accepts it, right? So that's the trouble.
Right. Then you get this misuse of information.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get the false sense of security, right? So it sort of comes full circle. I hate the false sense of security because that's worse than just insecurity. It's, pain.
And I've definitely I've done that before because there wasn't anything else. And it's like, hey, this is the best I've got to work with.
Well, that's fine. I mean, if you do that, if you make that known that this is the best we have to work with, and here are the gaps in the information, here's the gaps for the decision making that we're going to make based on this information. I think that's completely legitimate because it's a much more transparent conversation as opposed to what we typically see is, it's going to cost you this much money if you have a breach based on Panama.
Yeah.
There's just more work.
Or
we need better ways to share information anonymously about breaches so that our sample rate doesn't go from, so it goes from 419 companies to maybe 4 million companies.
Yeah. I mean, heck, even if we got to 4,000 companies, like more data would be great for that.
And so somehow that's a problem. I think that has to be fixed. Either as an industry, we figure out some way to do that. We're sharing threat data now more than we ever have before. So potentially, and there's lots of ideas on how you could potentially build something that would allow for that anonymous transfer of breach data about how much these things actually do cost.
Yeah. I guess, from a healthcare perspective, at a high level, you could even just look at what the OCR has fined you for and work off of that and work backwards. But yeah, it's not standardized even then.
Yeah. Good opportunity. And that's,
and
a lot of these things sound like, bitching, but there are things that are broken in our industry, and that's part of half the book. The other part is exploring ways that, I think we can fix it or make it better. Unfortunately, the false information is often used as well to sell us products because I can create a study that will support, that confirmation bias. I can make a study say whatever the hell I want it to say and convince you to buy something.
Yep.
Right? Just make it pretty, market it well. And we see plenty of that, I think, in our industry also. But some of the false information, and in chapter 10 of the book is talking about this, the shortage of information security talent in our industry. But then there's a segue part in this chapter 6, of how this lack of information, I think, is it's sort of telling when you look at just how many, what are the estimates for the number of unfilled information security jobs, in the next few years. We have one is 3.5 million, another one is 2 million, another one is 1.5 million, another one's 1.8 million. So the estimates are sort of all over the board. When you go from 1.5 on the low end to 3.5 on the top end,
it's a big spread.
Yeah, and so it just shows that there's a lack of maybe knowledge or data. We do know that there's going to be a shortage, though, because there's nobody, I haven't seen anybody claim that there's not. Right. So anyway, more information just sort of about those things, about the open positions and trending and all that kind of good stuff. The latest news often, we know that there are 3 reasons why people buy or people focus on information security. Typically, one is, you've been told you have to, a compliance requirement, either directly or indirectly, or a bad thing happened, a breach. And typically people overspend on security. And then the third is people actually want to do this well and do it right. And I'd say that third group is, I think my gut tells me it's probably the fastest growing group. There are more and more organizations who really do want to do this well. which is great because, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that was,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, we have a great example off the top of my head. We had a small software company in healthcare. They had 4 employees, and they said, help us. We know we don't know what we're talking about. We're going to be growing fast, and we want to do this correctly from the start. Right. I mean, that was, and of those, 4 or 5 companies I can think of off the top of my head that had good security programs, every one of them did it because they wanted to do it right. Right. It's when you're being forced to do it, that people do the bare minimum. They just do what they have to check the box.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are more of those happening. I think if I were to guess, and I don't have any data to support it, this is just gut. I would say it was probably 85, 10, 5 in those 3 buckets, right? So only 5% of the organizations seemed like were organizations that really wanted to do security because it's the right thing to do. They wanted to build it into their information or build it into their business. They understood that it's a business issue. They took a good pragmatic approach to it, right? Really focused on themselves and stuff like that. I would say that 5% has probably grown closer to 10%, now. It feels like the trend is going that way. It'd be interesting to see, I don't know how you'd ever gather that data in a short period of time. You kind of have to go by gut on that one. That's good to see.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think of all of the people that I've talked with. And I think you're right. We're seeing a lot more of the people going, hey, we're seeing other people have issues. We want to get out ahead of it. We want to do this right so that we don't go through what they've gone through, right? We want to avoid that situation. So yeah, I would say that's a larger percentage of who's contacting us is people that are, trying to get out ahead of it versus, well, we have to do this.
Right, which is cool. I mean, it really fits with our approach anyway. At FRSecure, the way we've always done security is let's do it right. Let's do it right from the beginning. Let's make it part of the business. We know that long term, the cost will be less, if you stay committed to it. And it's funny because, as much as I complain about the one global company that I work with today, they are very unique. They're not part of the herd. And they are trying to do it the right way. They just can't get out of their own way. But that's really cool to see. And I really enjoy doing that. They once in a while we get sidetracked by a compliance requirement or something, but at the end of the day, they keep coming back. So that's a positive. Anyway, so the herd also likes current news. So we talked a little bit about current news and how that becomes a big spender for information security. You'll see big bumps in sales numbers for any number of products, following the news of a breach, whether it be the TJ Maxx breach, the Target breach, there was a large bump in sales for vulnerability management and vulnerability scanning tools after the who's the big credit place?
Equifax.
Yes, after the Equifax breach, right?
Yeah.
So the herd likes that. The herd likes trends. Make a trend, you'll get people to do stuff.
Yeah.
You make current news, you'll get people to do stuff. And then, just mentioning some of the latest trends, in a recent publication. There's a bunch from here, but some of them are pretty cool. Cyber risk insurance will become more common. Breaches will get more complicated and harder to beat. Attackers will get smarter. So those are just trends, I guess, that were mentioned. Another danger to the herd mentality is running off the cliff. And then do you remember, when I was doing research for this part of the book, I thought it was really cool, just how the Native Americans used to hunt buffalo. They would call this thing the buffalo jump. So I just mentioned a little bit about that and then applying that buffalo jump mentality to our industry and how that can end up getting us in trouble. But, one size fits all, talk about that stuff, and then just a short diagnosis at the end. And then ideas. And I try to borrow as much as I can from people who are really kind of specialists
Mm-hmm.
In this, like, psychologists know psychology better than I ever will, but I can read their stuff and become smarter. So, one is Amy Morin. She's a world-renowned psychotherapist and author and all that stuff. And she has these 13 things mentally strong people don't do. And one is, stop being on autopilot. 2, make a conscious effort to form your own opinion. Make time to make decisions. Be aware of ways in which stress affects your decision making. Have you ever been stressed in information security, Brad?
Yeah, yeah, and just in IT in general, right? Yeah, you that's how you handle it. Definitely, I think sets apart certain people, right? It's holy crap, this is happening. What's going on? And you see some people just running around with like hair on fire, and others that just kind of eat it up and like, okay, let's do it.
Speaking of fires, this is how calm I am, Brad. My foot right now is on fire.
That's impressive.
Yeah, an incredible amount of pain.
I'm being socially engineered. No, you couldn't even tell.
Right. That's how I roll.
Yeah.
So this is the solutions part of this chapter. And you talk about, setting, what are things that I can do to make myself or get myself into a habit of focusing on me as opposed to focusing on the herd. It's always been my belief that if you build the best security program that you can for your organization, you will automatically be compliant. You will automatically be defensible. So it doesn't really matter where the herd is. Because you've done the things, you've got logic, you've got reasons why you made the decisions that you made, which are all put you in a good spot. And the herd, because the herd might be running off a cliff, the herd might be in the wrong position. You may not even be in the right herd. So, the second part of the chapter is, following these things should help you fight that off. And we can also use the herd for our advantage, right? We can point out how we've chosen to do things differently for different reasons that end up providing a cost benefit to us. So the herd may not be doing asset management because asset management is a pain in the ass for them. However, we've chosen to do asset management because it was our most significant risk, and we've realized these benefits from it and so on and so forth. So we can compare ourselves in that way to the herd, not compare ourselves to make sure we're in it, but to make sure that we're better than it.
Yeah.
Because obviously when you look at our industry, the herd doesn't have it all figured out.
No.
Right. So looking for opportunities to capitalize, on our information security investments, that's always awesome when you can go to executive management and show how your information security investments have helped make the company more money. You start speaking their language on, hey, look at all these new customers that we got, or how much less time we spend on answering vendor risk questionnaires because we've got this thing that we can share with them. I mean, there's just so many different ways that we can realize and optimize security outside of what the herd does to make us better competitively in the marketplace. So those are always good things. And I think executive management, most companies are in business to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So if we help them make more money, that's good.
Yeah.
And then don't be afraid to take risks. Take risks with some of the things that you do with information security. We do have a saying. I don't know. Have you heard me say it? You've probably heard me say it, that failure isn't optional. It's mandatory.
You've probably said it, but I just ignored you.
Listen to me. That's all right, man.
I love you. I agree with that, right? Everybody's going to make mistakes. It's how you learn and grow and become better.
Right. And it is cliche. It sounds cliche, but if you apply it, it really does. It makes better security people. They're not afraid to try new things, because that their heart and their motivation is in the right place. And most of the things, I've said, many times before too, the good thing about what I do for a living is if I screw up once, nobody dies. Probably. I mean, I guess roundabout in some weird way, the stars could align and somebody could. But and I don't work on, application development for, self-driving cars or medical devices, but you can, with those being exceptions, we don't need to take ourselves quite so seriously. We can take risks. We can try new innovative things and roll them back, swallow our pride and realize that this didn't work and try something else.
I mean, I personally didn't implement firewalls on the endpoints and shut down the entire network for the entire company accidentally as we were trying to improve security.
Yes, you did.
I've heard of people that have done that and learned from it and how to not do that twice. But right, it happens.
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, I truly think that if we're not being creative in the way we're doing things with information security, that we're kind of shying away from some of the difficult challenges, because there's no shortage of challenges.
Right.
Just pick your head up and look around and, oh crap, whatever. And so following the herd, being stuck in the herd and expecting the herd to figure that out and be innovative, we know that the herd won't do that. The herd is mediocre. The herd is not creative.
Mm-hmm.
So focusing, on your own and taking risks is awesome.
So Shelley had a comment, is it safe to say that failure isn't fatal?
In most cases. I think that's true. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If I failed, yeah. I think I've made boatloads and boatloads of mistakes, and I don't think anybody's died.
Yeah.
Right? And you stick your neck out sometimes, right? I mean, especially if you're a leader like you are, as the director of consulting services, and myself and other leaders, you stick your neck out sometimes, right? You create a new solution that is the right solution, and you're working so hard to get people to buy into this thing or this methodology that you've created or whatever it is. And then, you get a lot of flack for doing that. It's a risky thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But, unless if somebody else isn't going to figure it out, then why not us? Why wouldn't we figure it out? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, the hardest thing it was once I was, all right, I'm just going to do this, right? Once you get past that fear of what happens if I fail, I'm just going to do it and take that chance. Like once you realize that, it's not fatal, that if you can justify why you did it and have some backing and understanding behind it, people tend to go, oh, all right, I get it, right? And then it gets easier to then take those chances moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like you and I would take chances that are not calculated risks, right? And I realize that not everybody, my own mother, God bless my mother, called me arrogant. Am I arrogant? Do you think I'm arrogant?
No.
Would you tell me, though? You probably wouldn't tell me.
Yeah. If I had the opportunity to tell you that, of course.
No, because we get frustrated, of course, publicly. Hell yeah. No, but I was thinking, sometimes we get frustrated. I get frustrated with logic. I mean, it's just, some people can take calculated risks and some people can't, I think, because some people can't think through.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
difference.
Right. So I've seen a number of people take risks, and you look at them, you're like, seriously, how in the world would you have ever thought that would be a good risk to take?
I don't know. It sounded like fun.
Right. Or, in their mind, that was completely justified. It's like, oh, son of a gun. So I think taking risks and, using some logic in it or something, just making it not.
All right. Well, another comment from Alexander. Is it his outlook too negative? The outlook is the herd as a whole will not move forward, improving their InfoSec as a whole until large-scale liability is consistently imposed by courts. I would say that's probably a pretty accurate take on what we see a lot of times.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, I think
it's that 5% that are out ahead of it. The rest of them are going, well, I'm just going to do because this is what precedent says I have to do. I'm going to do it.
Right. And I think that's a lack of understanding how security can actually benefit the organization. You know, like I was saying, there was that 5% before, but you know, I think it's grown to 10-ish.
Right.
Not substantiated with data, but they see the benefit. They see it because we do have companies that are winning customers. They're getting customers because they have better security than their competition does.
Yep.
And they can communicate that well and stand on it well. So, you know, that's a market factor, a market effect that moves the herd. But I think it'll be a combination of things. It'll also be the things that happen in the courts. I think, you know, yeah, I mean, there's going to be a number of factors that will eventually move us there, but why wait? You know, let's get people doing it now.
Well, I agree. I'm just thinking, GDPR being so recent, we've had a lot of companies go, well, what are they going to do? How are they going to, find a U.S.-based company? We have no presence in the EU. We'll just wait and see how it plays out and then make a decision. That's not uncommon to hear. And that's
right.
kind of where that's at.
So what I hear when that sort of mentality is, I don't really care where my most significant assets are or where they're going until somebody tells me I should care about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And people won't disagree that your data is your most significant asset in most organizations. Yeah, when you ask them, do you have an inventory of this most significant asset? And do you know where this asset is flowing and going and moving? No clue.
I got a file server. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, there's a disconnect there, right?
Yeah. Right.
So someday, that's one of the motivators for writing the book too, is to point this out and hopefully to get some type of a movement or some type of, like-minded individuals to collaborate and start trying to figure out these difficult problems.
Well, I was going to say the flip side of that is my take on it. And we've actually had customers that have called, and this is where I've kind of gotten it from, is they're like, well, okay, I may not be impacted by GDPR, but it seems like that's the way people are going. I want to get ahead of it. Right. And that's what you want to see we see that as well.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Love it.
It's just a matter of time before we get there. So let's figure this out and be ahead of the game.
Well, I think some of my frustration too is I've never been much of a herd guy.
Yeah.
I've always been kind of I don't know. I guess I'd be a hippie back in the day if those were still things. Except I wouldn't do the drugs and stuff like that. I just do my thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that's why we get along so well. I'm the same way. It's like, it's right. Not. I kind of tend to look and go, what can I do differently than them and get ahead of the game and be different. I don't want to be like everyone else.
Right. Especially when I think everyone else is broken, and I don't want to say that in an arrogant way. I mean, I'll look and judge everybody, but it's just, I think we can do things better. I think every place can do things better. When I talked about earlier on, when, all the organizations that we've ever worked at, how many information security programs have I seen that I've been impressed with? Mm-hmm. It would be less than 5. And to tell you the truth, none of the information security programs that I had built would be in those 5.
No,
you know what I mean? So it's like, son of a gun. I've got my own
lessons learned from those. Yep.
And that's the honest truth. It's not that I don't know how to do it. It's just that I don't think I have done it.
Would you say maybe a better way is?
I would have liked to.
Would a better way be to describe yourself? You're not willing to settle for good enough. Just keep pushing yourself for being better than just good enough.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, for sure. And I think everybody should have some degree of that. And I realize that some people aren't like that. But if I were to build the best security program that I could ever build and then look at it, I would find flaws in it and things that I would want to make better. Man, I wish we would have kind of gone this route or gotten this business leader involved in the in the policy early on, or, I mean, there's always something, right?
Yep.
You try to take those things and just keep improving and making it better.
Yeah. But
I think at the end of the last page, I talk about Conor McGregor. I mean, how can you talk security without Conor McGregor? He's the famous MMA fighter, right?
Yeah.
But his quote was, "Winners focus on winning, losers focus on winners."
Yeah.
And I believe in that. I mean, I just believe that if I become the best person, or an organization becomes the best organization they can be, if they build the best security program they can build, and that doesn't mean the most over the top, spending the most amount of money. You don't measure the effectiveness of a security program on how much money you spent on it. You built a well-run, managing risks well, you'll automatically be compliant. You'll automatically be ahead of the curve or ahead of the herd, because they're not doing that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of truth to focusing on your own information security program, focusing on winning, and let them focus on you then.
Yeah.
And eventually you'll be that 5%.
Yeah.
So that's the chapter, man. It's a lot of just like self-righteous crap, I think. No, I'm just kidding.
That's what happens when you're arrogant.
Well, yeah, thanks, Mom. Yeah. I hope I'm not.
No.
I want to be humble.
I have never.
That's chapter 6. What's that?
I've never thought you were arrogant.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man. If I do, you smack me upside the head.
Hey, we got that on recording, so I can't be fired for that.
If I'm being arrogant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right.
Or prideful.
Okay. When's the book coming out?
I am. I'm taking a week off in September to do the next. It has to be through the publisher by the end of September. The final publisher thing, whatever they do.
Okay.
I've never done the book thing before, so it's been through some edits now, and now it's I have to do another final edit for September 30th is my deadline.
All right.
So I think by the end of the year, it'll be hard copy in your hand kind of book.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then you're going to write your book. You have to write a book someday.
I'm writing a kid's book because that's shorter, and you had to do a lot of work for yours.
Oh my God, I didn't realize it was so hard. Well, I didn't realize that somebody should have told me that I should have asked for advice. I didn't realize that I'd written twice as much as I needed to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's about that time we start wrapping this up. So I want to just thank everyone for joining us for another Hangout to discuss the herd mentality with Evan and Brad. A recording is going to be sent out within the next week, just to you have that to reference. And just thanks again, and have a great rest of the week.
All right. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Cole. Thank you, everybody. All right. Bye.